viewers, welcome to this session on transfer of stimulus control in behavior modification. The content of this video is prepared by Professor Bhupendra Singh and Dr. Poonam Singh from Barkatullah University, Bhopal. I am presenting this content of this video myself, Pramila Singh, Professor of Psychology, Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. Behavior modification is the field of psychology concerned with analyzing and modifying human behavior. Modifying means developing and implementing procedures to help people change their behavior, and these procedures are developed with goal of improving some aspects of personal life. Behavior modification is a therapeutic technique based on the work of B.F. Skinner, a famous psychologist. Skinner developed the theory of operant conditioning, which states that all behavior is governed by reinforcing and punishing stimuli. Behavior modification uses a scheduled approach that rewards desired behavior and punishes undesirable behavior. This technique continues to be used in therapy and is used in many psychological settings. To understand and modify operant behavior, it is important to analyze the ABC. ABC means A for antecedent, B for behavior and C for consequence. Because operant behavior is controlled by its consequences, behavior analysts analyze the event that follow the behavior to understand why it is occurring, and they manipulate the consequences of the behavior to modify it. The importance of antecedents, stimulus events that precede an operant response, is not less than the reinforcing consequence. The antecedents of a behavior are the stimulus events, situations or circumstances that are present when it occurs or were present before the behavior. In behavioral psychology, stimulus control is phenomena that occurs when an organism behaves in one way in the presence of a given stimulus and another way in its absence. Any stimulus that modifies behavior in this manner is referred to as discriminative stimulus. And stimulus control of behavior occurs when the performance of a particular behavior is controlled by the presence or absence of a discriminative stimulus. Now, what actually is stimulus control? Stimulus control occurs when the rate, latency, duration or amplitude of a response is altered in the presence of an antecedent stimulus. Stimulus control is acquired when the responses are reinforced only in the presence of a specific stimulus, known as the discriminative stimulus, and not in the presence of other stimuli, known as stimulus deltas. For example, the presence of a red signal at a traffic intersection increases the probability that a person will stop his vehicle, and a green signal will make the behavior of starting the vehicle probable. Some theorists believe that all behavior is under some form of stimulus control. Let us take an example to understand stimulus control. Say for instance, mother is present, that is an antecedent. Bobby asks for cake, that is a behavior of a child, and the consequence is mother gives him the cake. Now, other antecedent, father is present, Bobby asks for cake and father does not give him the cake. So, we can see the boy's behavior or asking for a cake was reinforced in the first situation when his mother was present, but it was not reinforced in the second situation where father was present. Now, the behavior will be continuing continuing to occur in the situation when it was reinforced and will no longer occur in the situation in which it was not reinforced. These examples clearly illustrate the principle of stimulus control. In each, a behavior was more likely to occur when a specific antecedent stimulus was present. Stimulus control develops because a behavior is reinforced only in the presence of a particular antecedent stimulus. Therefore, the behavior continues to occur in the future only when that antecedent stimulus is present. The antecedent stimulus that is present when a behavior is reinforced is known as the discriminative stimulus. The process of reinforcing a behavior only when a specific antecedent stimulus is present is called stimulus discrimination training. Then prompting, it is used to increase the likelihood that a person will engage in the correct behavior at the correct time. They are used during discrimination training to help the person engage in the correct behavior in the presence of a discriminative stimulus. According to Cooper and others, prompts are stimuli given before or during the performance of a behavior. They help behavior occur so that the teacher can provide reinforcement. Take another example. Antecedent is car written on blackboard. Behavior, Anjali says car, and consequences, tutor praises the Anjali. In the above example, the correct response is saying car when it is written on the blackboard. If Anjali does not respond, the tutor points out to the word written on the blackboard and says it's car. Then Anjali repeats after her tutor and says car. The teacher says very good then. As we know, if the correct behavior is not occurring, the behavior cannot be reinforced. In that case, Anjali is not saying car after it is written on the blackboard. The function of prompts is to produce an instance of the correct behavior so that it can be reinforced. The teacher gives supplemental stimuli, that is prompts, together with the discriminative stimulus so that the student will exhibit the correct behavior. The teacher then reinforces the correct behavior so that it will eventually occur whenever the discriminative stimulus is present. The use of prompts makes teaching or training more efficient. The teacher may not give any prompt and wait for the student to say the right word and then praise the child when actually she says the word. But this method of teaching learning, we call it trial and error method, takes long time. And it is quite possible that some students will never make a correct response. When the teacher uses prompts, she increases the chance that the student will make a correct response. For different students, different prompts may be used. There are a number of types of prompts. Response prompts like verbal prompts, gestural prompts, modeling prompts, physical prompts, and stimulus prompts like within stimulus prompts or extra stimulus prompts. Response prompts are like a response prompt is a behavior of another person that evokes the desired response in the presence of the discriminative stimulus. Verbal prompts are those prompts, the verbal behavior of another person which helps to evoke the correct response is a verbal prompt. When Anjali was learning to read, the teacher wrote car on the blackboard and said car, a verbal prompt. By saying car, the teacher prompted Anjali to make the correct response. Any verbal statement from another person may act as a verbal prompt if it makes the correct behavior more likely to occur at the right time. Verbal prompts may include instructions, rules, hints, reminders, questions, etc. Prompting example, child is given a lolly by his mother mom's friend. The behavior of the child says thank you, and reinforcement which comes from mother, mom's friend says you are welcome, what good manners you have. And prompt from the mother is, mom says what should you say, the child says thank you ma'am. So gesture prompts are also important. Any physical movement or gesture from another person that leads to the correct behavior in the presence of discriminative stimulus considered a gestural prompt, but the instructor does not demonstrate the whole behavior. For example, when a group of students are performing on the stage, as the music changes, the teacher hints the students by drawing a circle by his hand movements. If this gesture makes it more likely that the students will make a circle, it is considered as a gestural prompt given by the teacher. Similarly, modeling prompts can be given. A modeling prompt is a demonstration of the correct behavior by another person that makes it more likely that the correct behavior will occur at the right time. A person observes the model and imitates the modeled behavior. He makes the correct response in the presence of the discriminative stimulus. Because imitation is a type of behavior that most people learn early in life, most people benefit from observing the models. Physical prompts. With a physical prompt, another person physically helps the person to engage in the correct behavior at the right time. The person using a physical prompt is executing all or part of the behavior with the learner. It often involves hand over hand guidance, in which the trainer guides the person's hands through behavior. Prompting hierarchy. This slide is presenting before you the prompting hierarchy from most to least and least to the most. According to Sulzer and Meyer, physical prompts are appropriate when verbal, gestural and modeling prompts do not evoke the behavior. Unless the person resists, most behaviors can be prompted physically. In teaching how to button a shirt to a student with intellectual disability, the trainer puts his hand over the student's hand on the button and moves it in the required motion. There are stimulus prompts also. A stimulus prompt involves some change in a stimulus on the addition or removal of a stimulus to make a correct response more likely. It is used to make the discriminative stimulus more salient. Within stimulus prompts, the salience of discriminative stimulus can be changed in many ways. We can change the position of the discriminative stimulus or can change some dimensions of it, like size, shape, color or intensity. Extra stimulus prompts. Sometimes stimulus prompts involve adding a stimulus to help a person make a correct discrimination. Using a picture prompt with a written task helps the person to do the correct behavior. Alberto and Trodman recount an interesting use of a stimulus prompt by a teacher who wanted to reach a group of young children to identify their right hands. The teacher put an X on the back of each child's right hand to help the children make the correct discrimination. Over time, the X wore off and the children continue to make the correct discrimination. There can be a prompt hierarchy, and this slide presents before you the prompt hierarchy. Transfer of stimulus control. Once the correct response has occurred, the prompts must be eliminated so as to transfer stimulus control to the natural discriminative stimulus. Transfer of stimulus control is a process in which prompts are removed once the target behavior is occurring in the presence of the discriminative stimulus. Training is not complete until Anjali can read the word written on the blackboard without a verbal prompt. So, the end result of transfer of stimulus control is that the correct behavior occurs at the right time without any assistance. Whenever you add a prompt, you need a plan to eliminate it also. So, there are a number of ways to transfer stimulus control, like prompt fading, prompt delay, stimulus fading, etc. Prompt fading is the most commonly used method of transferring stimulus control. With prompt fading, a response prompt is removed gradually across learning trials until the prompt is no longer provided. Fading is involved in many everyday situations in which one person teaches a behavior to another person. Parents are likely to fade out their help and support when a child is learning to walk or to ride in a bicycle, and as a teenager progresses in driving, the driving instructor is likely to provide fewer and fewer hints regarding traffic regulations. In any situation in which a stimulus exerts strong control over a response, fading can be very useful procedure for transferring the control of that response to some other stimulus. Errorless discrimination training, sometimes referred to as errorless learning, is the use of a fading procedure to establish a stimulus discrimination so that no error occurs. The discovery and development of fading techniques have led to some changes in educators' views regarding the learning process. At one time, it was believed that people had to make mistakes while learning in order to know what not to do. However, errorless transfer to a discrimination can occur, and it has at least 3 advantages over procedures involving trial and error. Errors consume valuable time. If an error occurs once, it tends to occur many times, even though it is being extinguished. The non-reinforcement that occurs when errors are being extinguished often produces emotional side effects such as tantrums, aggressive behavior, and attempts to escape from the situation. Sometimes you can eliminate a prompt in just one step. You might need to tell a person only one time how to execute a behavior before the person performs the correct behavior without another verbal prompt. Likewise, you might have to model the behavior only once before the behavior occurs without further prompting. It is also possible that after only one physical prompt, the person might engage in the correct behavior. So, in the previous example where Anjali was learning to read, initially the teacher said the word as a verbal prompt, then she said part of the word, then the first letter of the word, and eventually she did not say anything as she presented the discriminative stimulus. Gradually saying less of the word over time was fading the verbal prompt. In each of these examples, one type of prompt was faded. This is known as fading within prompt. A study illustrated the use of physical prompting and fading within prompt to teach boys with profound mental retardation to eat with a spoon. Initially, the researcher held the child's hand with the spoon and physically prompted the entire behavior of scooping food with the spoon and putting it in the mouth. They then faded the physical prompting 7 steps until the child was using the spoon without any assistance. Each fading step involved less and less physical assistance as the physical prompt was eliminated gradually. Another type of prompt fading involves fading across different types of prompts or fading across prompts. For example, Radha, a woman with severe mental retardation, works in the stock room of the shoe department at the major store. Her job is to take the paper stuffing out of shoes so that the shoes can be displayed on the store shelves. She sits at a large table covered with shoes, and there was another worker who was putting the shoes on the table. After she pulls the paper out of a pair of shoes, another worker moves the shoes to the store shelves. The job coach has to teach Radha how to do the job correctly. The three-term contingency is as follows: antecedent, paper stuffing in the shoes, that was a discriminative stimulus. Behavior, Radha has to pull the stuffing out of the shoes, and the consequence was the job coach praises Radha. Because Radha cannot execute the correct behavior, the job coach uses prompts to get the behavior to occur and then fades the prompts. One method is least to most prompting and fading. The job coach provides the least intrusive prompt first and uses more intrusive prompts only as necessary to get the correct behavior to occur. If Radha does not pull the paper out of the shoes on her own, the job coach first says, Radha, pull the paper out of the shoe. This is the least intrusive verbal prompt. If Radha does not respond in 5 seconds, the job coach repeats the verbal prompts and points at the paper in the shoe. A gesture prompt. This is a gesture prompt. If Radha does not respond in 5 seconds, the job coach models the correct behavior as she provides the verbal prompt. If Radha still does not respond, the job coach uses physical guidance as she provides the verbal prompts. She takes Radha's hand, helps her pull out of the paper, and then praises Radha. On the next trial, the job coach goes through the same sequence until Radha responds correctly. Over trials, Radha will make the correct response before the physical prompt is needed, then before the modeling prompt, and then before the gestural prompt, until eventually she needs no prompt at all to pull the paper out of the shoes. The prompts were faded as Radha needed less and less assistance. Least to most prompting is used when the trainer believes that the learner may not need a physical prompt to engage in the correct behavior and wants to provide the opportunity for the learner to perform the task with the least assistance necessary. Another method of fading across prompt is most to least prompt and fading. With this method, the most intrusive prompt is used first and is then faded to less intrusive prompts. Most to least prompting is used when the trainer believes the learner will need a physical prompt to engage in the correct behavior. Using most to least prompting, the job coach would start by providing a physical prompt together with a verbal prompt. She would then start to fade the physical prompt as Radha successfully executed the behavior. Once she faded the physical prompt, she would provide a verbal and gestural prompt. Then as Radha continued to be successful, she would fade the gestural prompt and provide only the verbal prompt. Finally, she would fade the verbal prompt as well as Radha correctly took the paper out of the shoe with no assistance. Whether fading within prompt or across prompts, the ultimate goal is to transfer stimulus control to the natural discriminative stimulus so that the prompts are no longer used. Then prompt delay can be done. Another method is to transfer stimulus control from a response prompt to the natural discriminative stimulus is prompt delay. In the procedure, you present the discriminative stimulus, wait a certain number of seconds, and then if the correct response is not made, you provide the prompt. The time delay between the presentation of the discriminative stimulus and the prompt may be constant or progressive. In a study, adolescents with disabilities were taught to read common words that they would encounter in everyday life, like men, women, stop, enter, etc. They used a constant prompt delay procedure. They presented a word on a flashcard, discriminative stimulus, and if the student did not respond in 4 seconds, they said the word for the students, that will be a verbal prompt. Then objective was for the students to read the word within the 4 seconds before the prompt was provided. Eventually, all students read the words within the 4 seconds and the prompts were no longer used. Stimulus control was transferred from the verbal prompt to the written word. Whether the prompt delay is constant or graduated, the first trial always begins with a 0-second delay between the discriminative stimulus and the prompt. In subsequent trials, the prompt delay is inserted to allow the person to make the correct response before the prompt is given. If the person cannot make the correct response, the prompt is provided to evoke the response in the presence of the discriminative stimulus. Eventually, after the correct response is prompted and reinforced in a number of trials, the response will occur after the discriminative stimulus is presented but before the prompt is delivered. Once this happens consistently, stimulus control has been transferred from the prompt to the discriminative stimulus. Now we come to the stimulus fading. What is stimulus fading? Whenever stimulus prompts are used to get a correct response to occur, some aspect of the stimulus situation is changed to help the person make the correct discrimination. Eventually, the stimulus prompts must be removed through a process of stimulus fading to transfer stimulus control to the natural discriminative stimulus. If the stimulus prompt involved adding a stimulus to get the correct response to occur, stimulus fading would involve gradually removing that additional stimulus as the response begin occurring reliably in the presence of the discriminative stimulus. Once this additional stimulus is completely removed and the response continues to occur in the presence of the discriminative stimulus, stimulus control has been transferred to the discriminative stimulus. For example, when a young child has an X on the back of her right hand, this stimulus prompt helps her identify her right hand. As the X wears off over a course of few days, stimulus fading occurs. When the child identifies her right hand without the X, stimulus control has been transferred from the prompt to the natural discriminative stimulus. Stimulus fading is also used when the stimulus prompt involves a change in some aspects of the discriminative stimulus itself. In this case, stimulus fading would involve gradually changing the discriminative stimulus from its altered form. The teacher who is teaching the student to point to the exit sign uses a stimulus prompt by making the exit sign bigger than the enter sign. The teacher would use stimulus fading by reducing the size of the exit sign gradually until it was the same size as the enter sign. So once they were the same size, the stimulus prompt would be gone and stimulus control would be transferred from the size of the word prompt to the natural word itself. Now, how to use prompting and fading? Both are important. When your aim is to develop appropriate stimulus control over a behavior, you will use prompting and transfer of stimulus control. Before deciding to use such procedures, it is important to determine whether you are addressing a problem of stimulus control or a problem of non-compliance. If the person has not learned the behavior or has not learned to do the behavior in the correct situation, the appropriate procedure is prompting and transfer of stimulus control. However, If the person has exhibited the correct behavior in the correct situation in the past, but now refuses to do it, the problem is non-compliance, and prompting and fading would not be the most appropriate procedure. There are a number of steps involved in this. One is choose the most appropriate prompting strategy. You need to choose the prompt that best fits the learner and the learning task. When teaching a new behavior, response prompts are most appropriate. For people with developmental disabilities or young children, stronger or more intrusive prompts such as physical prompts are appropriate. If unsure of the level of prompt that is needed, you may use graduated prompt strategy such as least to most strategy, in which less intrusive prompts are tried first and more intrusive prompts are used as needed. Stimulus prompts are most appropriate when you want to help a person make a correct discrimination. Step 2 is get the learner's attention. That is again very important. Before you present the prompt or the discriminative stimulus, be sure that the learner is paying attention. Reduce or eliminate distractions and competing stimuli, and if necessary, prompt and reinforce the learner's attention before beginning an instructional trials. Then the next step is present the discriminative stimulus. The learning trials always starts with the presentation of the discriminative stimulus. This is the stimulus that should evoke the correct response in the learners once training is completed. If the learner makes the correct response in the presence of the discriminative stimulus, prompts are not necessary at all. So, next step will be prompt the correct response. If the discriminative stimulus does not evoke the correct response, the prompt should be provided. When using a stimulus prompt, you will change the stimulus situation in some way when presenting the discriminative stimulus, or you will change some aspects of the discriminative stimulus. When using a response prompt, you will present the discriminative stimulus and then immediately deliver the appropriate prompt. Next step, one has to reinforce the correct behavior. When the learner engages in the correct behavior, whether with prompting or unprompting. So, in the presence of the discriminative stimulus, immediately provide a reinforcer, because the goal is for the learner to engage in the correct behavior without prompts when the discriminative stimulus is present. You should increase the magnitude of reinforcement for unprompted response. So, for example, praise should be more enthusiastic, or a larger amount of reinforcer should be given. Next step is transfer stimulus control. As soon as possible, prompt should be eliminated to transfer stimulus control from the prompt to the natural discriminative stimulus. When fading response or stimulus prompts, the fading step should be small so that the person continues to engage in the correct behavior may be lost. When using a prompt delay procedure, you can enhance transfer of stimulus control by providing more reinforcement for responses that occur during the delay before the prompt is given. Then continue to reinforce unprompted responses. If the correct behavior is occurring in the presence of the discriminative stimulus after prompts have been eliminated, continue to reinforce the behavior. As the learner continues to engage in the correct behavior, switch from a continuous reinforcement schedule to an intermittent reinforcement schedule. This will help to maintain the correct behavior over time. There is a misapplication also, just as other behavior principles and procedures can be applied unknowingly by those who are not familiar with them, so can prompting and fading be misused. However, it appears to be more difficult to misuse fading inadvertently because the necessary gradual change in cues rarely occurs by chance. But care should be taken to avoid confusing fading with shaping. Both are procedures of gradual change, and however shaping involves reinforcement of slight changes in a behavior so that it gradually comes to resemble the target behavior. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you gained a lot on this particular topic. Thank you very much once again.